I hope that you guys can see it in a second once I click on share. Can you see it okay?
It goes perfectly.
Perfect. Great. So first of all, thank you very much for having me. I hope that you don't mind if I look on my notes every now and then. It's not that I'm actually checking my phone, but I'm just having my notes here on the side. So first of all, what is my topic today about? Well, it's I think Francesco, you introduced. I have made a choice in my past to not follow a regular career path, as you would expect from a very German person like me. But instead, I kind of went for a different alternative, and I just want to quickly talk about it with the respect of the current situation as well, taking that into account. So that is why my topic is from corporate to creative. So first of all, my name is Alex. I am from Germany. Currently, I live in Berlin, and I work as a photographer and filmmaker. I specifically focus on creating digital content with a focus of humans. So I love taking pictures as well as videos of stories of humans that have not been communicated yet, that have not been told yet. For example, one project that where Fran and I were in touch was in the Talamanca filming that we did a couple of weeks ago, which was a perfect example of exactly the kind of project that I'm really passionate about. So that being said, if you look at my CV from a very professional perspective, it's very straightforward. I come from Germany. I moved to Maastricht where I studied. So this is my home university, where I did my bachelor's in international business. So I always wanted to work internationally. That's why I studied there. And then the one perk that we had in Maastricht, or that they offered, was to go abroad. And I loved spending time abroad in other countries, and I wanted to explore that more. So that's why I loved actually to study there. Although business side, of course, there were certain topics that were, more important than others. I especially love the international aspect, which is why I went to study abroad in Singapore. Then I went to Australia to work there for a bit. I did some volunteering in Africa afterwards. And then I finished my bachelor's. And then I thought, okay, I might as well do the master's, because that's kind of what you have to do these days to stay break even with everybody. And I went to study in the west coast of California, and then I came back to Europe, and I scored a job, right? I wrote one application. I thought, this is not going to happen anyways, but I might as well try it. And I just landed a job with a big company. And from there on, my entire life changed to a professional background. So I worked for this company forever, which is Bayer. And it was a lot of fun because they sent me around a lot. So they sent me next to Germany, of course. They also sent me to France. Then I moved to India for half a year. Then I moved to the States again for half a year. And in the end, I settled in Berlin, where I worked for 3 more years for the company, before I realized that none of that was actually really what I actually wanted to do. So for 5.5 years, one could say that I spent my time in the wrong company, but ultimately I learned a lot in this company as well. And I'm going to come to that in a minute. But that is kind of the professional perspective that I could tell my CV as. But then obviously I decided to go for something completely different, which is why a friend of mine and I, we had this idea of doing something a little bit different. So we started a label that focuses on sustainable clothing, as well as corporate content creation, which is what I've been doing for the last couple of months now. So it's a little bit of a different change, because from a very corporate environment where I was a business analyst, I was working with Excel all day long, and I was number crunching, doing slides, doing presentations, working with big data, and trying to find efficiencies in a global network of supply chains. This is what I was making my money as. But then I realized that all the creative aspects that I was always seeking in my free time, I couldn't really do that in my corporate time, right? Like I had almost like a shadow life where I was developing narratives in my mind, or I was producing videos, be it about traveling, be it about other people, be it about certain issues or certain topics. I always felt the urge to create photos, create videos along whatever I did, be it traveling, be it being in Berlin, be it running with my friends. I always wanted to develop this, but I couldn't really, because in the corporate setting I was in, it was almost like a lock-in. But I still tried it, and for a couple of years it worked, because I could kind of take what I know about corporate work and kind of combine it with creative work. But in the end, it was always kind of in parallel. So that's why I came up with this, to just quit my job. It was a very safe job, I realize now, given that the economy at the moment is not the most stable. But I did it with a very, with a purpose. And then if you look at it actually not from a professional perspective, but more from an experience perspective, it is almost a kind of different picture that emerges. Because if you think about it, at least that's the way that I look at it, there's always two separate ways, right? If you look at it from a career perspective, or from the perspective of a student, there's the academic experience, the things you learn in university about how to, first of all, of course, how to organize your own mind, how to write papers, how to write essays, how to contribute to the academic environment, to your university, but also to understand what the academic environment on a global level is like. Thinking about what to study, how to study, and essentially what kind of academic career you want to do. Do you want to study a bachelor's? Do you want to study also a master's? Do you want to do PhD afterwards? Do you want to do postdoc? All these kind of experience that you learn in this realm is what I kind of see as academic experience, which was everything for me until I joined a company, right? It was everything I knew, because I went to school and I went to university, and I had every academic concept in my mind, but zero work experience. And then there's work and life experience. It's almost like in a computer game, right? Where you have both a work parts where you learn about certain tools, and you have life parts where you learn about how to not get robbed in a dark place, let's say, right? How to be smart, how to be eloquent, or how to just get around life, right? How to open a bank account, how to do all of these kind of things to continue as a human being. So that's why I thought, okay, in my university, I learned a little bit about life, but I mostly learned about how to be an academic, how to be an academic person, or how to write academically and do all these academic things like exams and so on. And then when I went abroad, I did a lot of life and especially life experience, because I traveled around Asia a lot. I learned very little in my studies abroad, I have to say. Then I went to Australia, where the picture was even clearer, because I only learned that I almost didn't have enough credits in my university. That's the only academic experience I had there. But I learned a lot about life, because I had a job there and I was on the other end of the world. And in Africa, it was very similar. My academic experience was very limited. I learned a bit of Swahili, so that really counted. But I learned a lot about how they were doing life over there, and how they were improvising on certain topics like civil engineering, for example, when it comes to infrastructure, for example. That was really, really, really insightful for me from a perspective of life, less so of my academic career. Then my study abroad in California, once again, I didn't really take that much stuff academically with that, but I learned a lot about the Western American way of thinking about risk, for example, when it comes to entrepreneurship, right? They have a very different look from a German perspective about how you set up a business and how you believe in your own ideas versus a very risk-averse German mindset. So there was a lot of experience there. And then all of that stuff I learned inside the company, none of that was actually academic, no surprise, but I learned a lot about how to survive in a corporate environment, and how to develop projects, and how to analyze data, and how to do these kind of things that before I had absolutely no idea of. I mean, when I studied, I had zero experience with Excel, for example, Microsoft Excel. I didn't know how to operate it. And in a couple of years, I got better and better at it. So all of that is kind of the experience that you gather over the years, and that you gain from every aspect. So even if you're in a situation where you're maybe not 100% happy with a certain curriculum or a certain course, then you still have the opportunity to learn a lot about life or a lot about work. So I think this is a different way of looking at your CV. So now at my current job, I have no idea. Like, I'm just building my job. I'm just building what I want to be a company. At the moment, it's not even that, right? Because it's at the very early stage. But in the end, it might be that I learn a lot about life and a lot about work, essentially. So in the end, it might be a bit of a gamble, but in my opinion, it's very much worth it. So I think two key takeaways from that message really is that point one, a CV is a matter of perspective. Is it that you're looking at it from a professional perspective? Is it from an experience perspective? How do you define your own CV? How do you define your own way? And that's almost giving me the segue to the next part, which is about telling a story. And that's basically what I did. I told you a story from a perspective of an experience or from a professional. And then once again, this would be me here. This was my photo inside of the last company I worked for. And then this is me last year in the field in Tajikistan, where we filmed a running documentary while running at 4,000 meters of elevation. And that's basically me as a creative. So it's a career path, so to say, is what you define it to be. But at the same time, I strongly believe that in this 21st century, it is growingly non-linear. It's getting less important how straight of a line you do. And I'm reflecting that most about my own origin from a more German background, where it's very important that you get your job. I mean, you study, you get your job, you get your career, and then you go. Whereas there's other ways to also develop your skill set, your personal career. And that should not be forgotten. So that really brings me, as I said, as a segue into the next topic, into storytelling, because in the end, a lot of it is actually just about telling a story. So in the end, in any job that you do, be it in an academic job, be it in a private economy job, be it in a public job, you kind of have to come up with a vision for yourself about certain things and match it with the expectation of your boss, of a client, of anything. And that's what you use communication for, right? You have an idea, you want to pitch it to somebody to get funding for your startup. You go to a corporate and you have your corporate job, but you have a great idea for a project. So you go to your boss or his boss's boss and pitch it to him. You have an idea, you have a vision, and you need to match it with the expectation of your boss, with your client, with the brand of the client, with anybody that you want to throw this idea at. And you do that over communication. And just like in every job that you do, be it a carpenter, be it a school teacher, every job requires a certain set of tools. And I mean it more in almost like in a physical way. If you think about the plumber or like an IT engineer who needs a laptop, or a carpenter who has like wood tools, or a shepherd who has his shepherd stick and a butcher's knife. I don't know. I mean, everybody has a certain set of tools. And I think that in communications, a lot of those tools seem to be intangible. Storytelling, for example, is one of those tools. It's almost like you come in with a toolbox and you have different modules and different tools inside of this toolbox that you can use in order to sell your story. And that's what storytelling is for me. I mean, it's one way to get your message across to anybody who's consuming your idea. You tell your idea over a story, and it's a powerful thing, but it's something that needs some practice. So if you look at it from two different perspectives, I mean, on the one hand, I established that concept of a very cliche corporate job where you go into a company. It can be a big company, and it's kind of, you know, here the corporate job is almost like a global job in a global company. So very far away from actually the money is made, but more where the company is steered. Versus a creative job, which I kind of put in here as a freelance job, right? Where you try to find different clients, you try to find your own way. It could be an entrepreneur, it could be anybody who's on kind of working for himself or working on more creative tasks, let's say, or more creatively around. So of course, there's certain similarities and differences. One of the similarities is that there are certain aspects that are very important to getting a project done. You need to understand the user requirements, for example. If you don't know what your boss actually wants, then you can't pitch him a project that interests him. If you think about pitching him an idea where, you know, you want to have the windows tinted, or the color of the walls should be blue instead of green, then the question is, what is the, you know, return on investment for your boss? So understanding the user requirements of your idea is important both in a corporate job as well as in a creative job. So is identifying stakeholder roles and responsibilities. Who's going to be the one who's going to pay for it? Who is doing what role inside of the project that you're thinking, or the solution you're thinking about? The same about creative jobs. And the third one is setting up and using clear communication channels is super important. If nobody knows what you're talking about and what you mean, then nobody's going to get your vision and your ideas. At the same time, if everybody's shouting at each other at the same time, then nobody can communicate in a proper way. So setting up and maintaining these channels, be it, think about WhatsApp. Is it a proper way of discussing project status? Probably not. What about Zoom? Is this a better way than me being in Costa Rica right now? I mean, I wish I could be with you guys, but at the point in time, it is the best way we can do, right? It's also a form of communication or a medium. Other channels like Slack, other channels like email, personal communication, all of these communication channels have a specific and very important, unique way and a very unique opportunity, but at the same time, you need to choose them wisely. Differences that there are, of course, it kind of depends of the setting. Once again, if you go for the corporate job, which is very high level, global, and far away from the real business, versus a creative job, which is more hands-on and closer to where you have to deliver results towards your the end user of what you're creating, then in a corporate setup, you would need to tell your story in order to get a job. Whereas as a creative, you need to tell a story for the brand that you are, in this case, pitching for in order to get the job. Or you need to tell the story of a person that you want to interview. Or you need to pitch a person an idea, a vision, whereas to score the job, I guess. Whereas in a corporate situation, it's more about telling your own story, why you are beneficial for the company. And that's the second point, that most companies actually in a corporate situation don't want to have a ready-made solution. That's something that's sometimes mistaken, that, you know, they want to have a candidate coming in for a job and then actually giving them advice. That's not going to happen because you know so little about the company. What they want is to have an open mind who's smart and who can think good in a very, you know, efficient way, that understands problems quickly and then can solve it for the company. Whereas in a creative setup where you're trying to understand what is the question of my client, the client usually wants more of a turnkey solution. The client wants to be understood, and then they want to have result in the form of a ready-made solution. That's a bit of a difference, because you can come to your client and say, hey, I'm a great problem solver, I can work for you guys. They don't have the resources for that. They hire the person, or they hire you for a certain job. So it's a different aspect here, I guess. So that leads to the focus, which in a corporate setup, at least that's my experience, a corporate job can be very, very beneficial to help you building up your toolbox. So understanding what is your toolbox, what kind of tools in terms of, for example, communication, or in terms of writing, in terms of photography, in terms of coding, programming, all these kind of things, what kind of tools are there in this setup, and you know what is the overlook, what do people need in order to get this job done. But then I have the feeling that a creative job helps you more in understanding each of those tool knowledges, be it working with a specific software, or trying out new ways with the software or with a certain tool. It could also be carpenters can go for a different tool in a physical way. And also picking up new tools quickly, because you need to be more agile. This kind of goes back to the fact that in corporate jobs, it's more that you have a very defined set of responsibility, whereas in a creative job, you are more on your own. So you need to be versatile. It could be that tomorrow there's a new software on the market that you need, or a new tool. So you need to know about your tools, but you need to also be quickly able to pick up new tools quickly. So some takeaways from this, I guess, is that storytelling, first of all, as said, is a very important tool when it comes to actually any job that is out there. But depending on the recipient that you have in front of you, you need to adjust the way that you tell a story and that you apply storytelling from a communication perspective. And the second one is that focus is very much, or setting focus is very important for a successful communication. I guess that's what you guys know better because you study it and I don't. Then, actually I'm missing a slide here, but then basically Corona happened. And as we all know, we are kind of stuck to our mobile devices and our computers at the moment and our TVs. So I looked out for two very nice ways of taking a situation like this crisis and making the most of it. So I have two examples from social media here right now that I found to be very nice at storytelling. The first one you see on this page, it is, I just call it Love Over Quarantine, but it's a guy from New York. He's a photographer. His name is Jeremy Cohn. I didn't know him before. I just basically stumbled upon him. And what he explains is he made basically 3 videos on Instagram, and I think they're on TikTok as well, where he was just seeing somebody from the opposite building, I don't know, dancing in the sun, and he made contact with them over writing his number onto his drone and then flying the drone over to the other building and trying to make contact with that person. It ended up of them having actually virtual dinner together, and he put himself in a big rubber ball to roll over to her while sticking to the rules and not actually having physical contact. But they met in person, so to say, then, and even brought flowers, but they couldn't bring it out of the rubber ball. So the way that he explains and the way that he films it in a very quick way, it's a very mobile setup, and it's a fantastic way of telling a story like this. The entire thing takes less than 2 minutes, but it's a really, really nice way. There's a QR code in the bottom left corner here, which you can use to find an article about the story. In my opinion, a very nice way of using your time during quarantine to create a story and create a narrative, really. He found a girl, develops a story around it, and then in the end, I think he even got a sponsorship from a local photo dealer who lent him some lenses for his quest. So he pitched it to the photo guy and said, hey, I have this great idea. And the photo guy gave him big telephoto lenses so that he could get good shots for his video. The second video is somebody you should know from, you can know from social media, Cardi B, an American singer. So you might know the video that is here on from her Instagram. I just grabbed it today from her Instagram, where she's in the caption. She's saying that she's stocking up on food, but during the video, she actually says that coronavirus is happening, and she's raising awareness in her own way, right? I mean, with for me, very scaring fingernail length, but at the same time, the way that she said it was very catchy for some reason. So there was a DJ with the name of iMarquise who remixed just her Instagram video where she says coronavirus, it's getting real, and put it into a song. And in a couple of days, this song made it to the Billboard charts, actually getting a lot of traction on media. And that is just well, it wouldn't be as unusual for pop culture, but both iMarquise as well as Cardi B took this as an opportunity to donate all of the money that was generated with this song. I mean, it has over 1 million streams already on the regular streaming services, to donate it for a crisis relief. So I mean, it's very, it's very marginal. It's a very marginal person out on social media, but just taking it and kind of remixing something and then using it with the added benefit of somebody's bigger audience is just, I think, a very smart way to getting something like the corona or the importance or the dangers of a pandemic like the corona crisis to everybody. Even the ones who are just following Cardi B will finally understand that this is really happening. And only if she says coronavirus, it's getting real. So Here on the right-hand side, there was a mural, a graffiti on I think a Texan wall, a wall in Texas somewhere. I think San Bernardo was it. The left-hand side is the original, and just in the last days, I think the original author sprayed over his own graffiti and put a mouth protection piece over it, which Cardi B then retweeted again and said that she really, really appreciated it. So things like that just take storytelling on a bizarrely different level. But in my opinion, it was also a very nice example of how to get traction with a story, and then how to creatively remix something, because that's also storytelling, right? If you remix something, then you create something new, essentially. Well, depending on your legislation. So once again, takeaways from that. Even in difficult times like we have right now with the COVID-19 pandemic, stories can be told. In my opinion, they also have to be told. As long as you stick to the rules, there's no way not to tell stories. And there's actually no excuse, because actually you have everything that you need to tell a story, which is your phone. Probably most of you have a phone with a camera, and then that is everything you need to tell a story. So you can film something. There's free apps on the market to edit your footage on your phone. I just used a free software today to edit a video about a friend who delivered pizza in this times. So this is totally possible without any expensive software. A phone is what most people have these days anyways. The question is just which story you're going to tell. So I believe that everybody in this call has a story that they can tell. It's just a matter of doing it. So I challenge everybody now. I think challenges these days are extremely popular for some reason. I challenge everybody to go out and tell a story with a phone for a day. I think that is a great challenge these days. All right. Thank you. That's it. First of all, from my side. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you for this great presentation, Alex. Can you just stop the screen sharing so we can let's start with the Q&A? Chicos y chicas que me escuchan, preguntas, o sea, podemos hacerlas. Si se sienten cómodos en inglés, las hacemos en inglés o en español y yo las pongo en Google Translate. No es broma. Hagamos preguntas. Okay, let me start. So let me do this first. So you were saying like, well, let's start from the easiest part. Can you recommend us some like apps for editing photos and video? The ones you were talking about before?
Absolutely, yeah. So there's one. I don't want to make too much product placement here, but just one which I just found is called InShot. There's a free and a premium one, but the free one is completely sufficient. You can cut videos with it. It's really good. It's called InShot. You can also put it here in the chat. And the other one that I'm using for photos is called Lightroom. There's a mobile version for it. I'll also put it in the chat. It's really good for photos. There's a free version as well, which is everything you need to have. There's tons of apps that can edit a photo. I personally really like Lightroom because I also use it on my computer. But you don't have to pay for either ones to actually get really, really good results. And as I said, just today, I edited a video with InShot, and it was a matter of minutes.
Okay, super. Okay, there you have one from Amanda. Hi, thank you for your talk. My question is, if I want to start photography, which type of camera should I start with?
I think the easiest camera to start with is actually your phone. There's so high definition cameras and phones these days, and it doesn't need to be the most expensive camera. It can be actually any camera. A good start is actually to research your phone's camera. If you have a recent phone, that's of course a little bit more easy, because then if you Google a little bit about like search online for tutorials on how to use your specific phone camera, then there's tons of settings you can unlock or you can change depending on the camera you're using. If you're kind of done with your own phone camera and you want to go into something more professional, then there's lots and lots and lots of good camera producers these days that do very, very good budget cameras for a start. You can get a very good second-hand camera on the market from all of the big companies, be it Canon, be it Nikon. It doesn't need to be expensive for the start. I think any kind of budget range is doing the trick. And then once you find that there's something in there that you really like, then you can develop more, or let's say research a little bit about different camera models again, and then upgrade a little bit. That's exactly how I started. Nobody ever told me anything how to do it. I just went out and tried with a friend's camera, and then I thought I really like it. And that was basically 15 years ago, and then I never stopped. And that's where I'm now.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi. Hi, Emily.
Hola. I had a question about what you said of corporate jobs and creative jobs, because you said, well, you stated their similarities and then their differences. But my question is, do you think there's a way you can have a corporate job that is more on the creative side, or like a balance between both of them?
Absolutely. I mean, I put out probably the most uncreative corporate job out there onto my own CV, and I didn't think about much when I started working in the company. And I mean, the company was fine. It was really, I learned so much in there, and I don't miss a single day of my life spending inside the company. So it was actually also for me very, very beneficial to work there. But no, of course you're right. There's companies that have a way more, let's say, creative perspective than a big player in the pharmaceutical industry, right? Where everything is very regulated. But if you go to any other big corporate player, be it Coca-Cola or anybody, there's in either industry, in fast-moving consumer goods, or be it in banking, or be it in every industry, you both have big creative corporates, or at least the bigger the company it is, the more likely you actually have certain pockets where these kind of people consolidate. So there's always the need for some people with a very creative mindset, even in a big company. I didn't happen to find it here in Berlin, or actually the timing wasn't really, really good. So that's why I didn't go into one of those pockets, but they are there. These kind of pockets for creative people or for creative minds are still given in a big company. And I kind of painted a black and white picture here on purpose to juxtapose it, but it's still possible. But of course, just from an organizational perspective, the smaller the company, the more likely you have people who are still a little bit more agile in their thinking, just from the perspective that they don't have so defined work routines or work tasks, right? So you still have more like the jack of all trades in a startup, and then the more people you have just operationally, the less you actually have people who do more than one task, essentially. So it depends on the industry. It depends on the country you're in. I mean, Germany is a notoriously uncreative environment, I would say, especially in big companies. But I mean, I would probably bet that in any big company in the Silicon Valley, people are more creative than anything that's happening in Berlin.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you, Amanda. So now we have Gabriela. Gabriela says, tips on placing yourself on the market as a photographer, especially on social media.
Very good question. I mean, the one thing that's kind of my meta analysis, right? Of everybody and every voice that I heard from different kind of photographers who are confronted with this question, everybody's kind of saying, you need to find your niche, right? You need to, and that's also reflecting my opinion, you need to find your own style and then just push it. I mean, one of my favorite YouTubers always said, always be uploading, right? I think Casey Neistat said that. You just don't stop, just push for it, find your own passion. Try to always reflect, that's my personal opinion, try to reflect what you really passionate about in terms of photography or filming or writing or blogging or whatever, and then just, you know, go for it. And don't feel too obliged to stick to what, you know, the next best Instagram star with, I don't know, X thousand followers has. Because in order to really make the cut these days, you need to come up with something completely new. And there's so many good examples out there of creators who do something completely new and don't throw the 15 vlogging, I don't know, travel vlog on there, but who come up with a completely different concept of combining things or going more into the visual effects or stuff like that. There's lots and lots of good examples.
Thank you, Alex. So I have here another one from Raul. Raul says, how do you choose what story to tell? It's a good one.
That is a very, very good question, especially in 2020, or I should have said 2019. 2020 is very COVID-19, but especially in these days where there's so much content out there, right? I mean, everybody's flooded. When you, I don't know, when you open Instagram and 5 seconds after you open Instagram and drag down, there's 5 new stories that are try to be told, right? So we're looking at a complete flood of information and of content, of course, which I'm also being, you know, which I also face myself against. But I always, I don't know, I don't want to say 100% go for my gut feeling, but when I, for example, heard about the great opportunity to come to Costa Rica and go and spend some time in Talamanca and develop some stories around the indigenous people or the indigenous communities in that area, that was something that completely resonated with my vision that I have for the company I want to build, because I want to focus specifically on telling stories of people that have not been told yet. And that was, for me, that was a no-brainer. But, you know, it's a balance between focusing yourself on a certain subject, and at the same time, you can't be too narrow. If I would say, I only want to tell stories of indigenous communities around the world now, then after a certain amount of time, I will probably have told all of the stories, at least that you can do at the moment. So you kind of have to follow your gut feeling, but also think about it from an economic perspective, because you need to pay your rent in the end of the day.
Super, Alex. So then we have Patrick. So when you left corporate environment, were you scared of the unknown challenges? I had that one too.
100%, of course. I mean, it's funny because somebody told me that you first quit a job with your mind, right? First, you make the determination to say, this is not for me anymore, and that's it. And that's the point where you quit with your mind, and then you quit with your heart, and then you're out anyways. So by the time that you meet your boss and you say, hey, by the way, here I go, it doesn't hurt anymore, and you're not worried about it, right? Because then you already made the conscious decision. But I thought about this for over a year. So first it's in your subconsciousness, and then it's in your consciousness, and then in your conscience, and then in the end you make the call, or you don't make the call because there's a new opportunity coming up, right? Maybe it's just about the situation with your current position, and then somebody else is offering you another position, and you're like, wow, that's exactly what I was waiting for. But I think it is, of course, super scary, especially for a German. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, all of my friends were like, dude, you make a lot of money, you have a super safe job, everybody needs you, they're not gonna fire you because they really need you. Why don't you stay? And I thought about this for years, but at the same time, there were also a lot of friends who really encouraged me and said, you've been complaining about the fact that you can't do X, Y, Z in your job. And I mean, it was not just like complaining about your job, but that you can't develop a creative narrative necessarily in your job, and that it's not making you happy. And that's something that I realized. Of course, it's a risk. Of course, in certain instances, like when a global virus is surfacing, you're thinking, oh, should I have done it? But for me, I don't ever have the feeling that the question to that is no. I always think it's yes. It was the perfect time. People say there's not the perfect time. It is. There's this time frame, and if you hit it, then you're absolutely happy with it.
Thank you. So then we have, well, Camila says, I think it's really brave what you did. Then we have a question from Mariana. I'm gonna skip the comment. So the question is kind of like, how should we share our stories? Is there a correct way to share it, or are we going to learn it just by doing it?
100% learning by doing. I mean, until Fran, actually, we talked about this during this talk here. I never really reflect too much about this thing that is storytelling, right? I never thought about why how you share stories differently in different channels or in different situations in life or in different career paths. There was an opportunity for me as well to reflect on that. So it's not that I wake up and I'm like, yeah, I completely changed my way of communicating stories or sharing these. So if I understand your question correct, I mean, there is not one way to tell a story. It really depends on who you want to. I mean, the instance in your life, the risk at stake, the project behind. And once you try with this, I mean, I always encourage to go for a smaller story and just try it out. Because one thing that I learned is that if you go too crazy too quickly, then the likelihood that you're going to fail is higher, and that's very discouraging. If you think about this challenge of mine, right, to go and tell a story, it doesn't need to be a Hollywood movie. It doesn't need to be 45 minutes. It can be 15 seconds, Instagram story, like this format, portrait format, one Instagram story that is cut, that is not one take, but you go and film something in different cuts, cut it together, and you have 15 seconds of output. This will give you way much more of a confidence boost compared to having an endless project that's frustrating. So in order to keep the frustrations down, try small and then learn, and then go bigger and go bigger and go bigger.
Super, Alex. Then we have Esteban Garcia. He says, hi, Alex, thank you for your talk. I'd like to ask you, how much time do you consider is necessary for getting academic experience and for getting job experience?
That's a very good question. So, I mean, from my perspective, I think that for me, a master's degree was sufficient. I mean, I spent 4.5 years, around 4 years in university, and that was enough for me to understand that I liked the challenges of an academic career, but I would not have been happy with a PhD, because I really wanted to go and make money in like the public, the private sector. So for me, this amount of time was sufficient. But I have other friends who are now assistant professors because they really went for the PhD and they're really happy with what they do. And they can still change and move into a private sector where their pay is higher, of course. So it really depends on how much you love writing essays, I have to say. I mean, doing tests and working academically, which is something that I really, really appreciated it. I mean, it's really, really good to have high quality writing, but at the same time, it's not for everybody, and I know it. I mean, I've also tons of friends who would never go back to university, and still I have a professor back home who always tells me, yeah, we have a part-time PhD, and I'm like, yeah, well, I think that's not going to happen in this life anymore. And then your second question was, and for getting job experience. I mean, job experience, you can never have enough. Even after my 5 years, it sounds like I was in the jail, which is not the case. But even after 5 years, I know very little. Of course, in the field I was working in, I know my way around, but it's still, I mean, there's so much to do. This is why in the end of your career, you have so much experience that you can share with an even wider audience. Right now, I talk in front of 44 people, but I guess that if you go to, I don't know, Warren Buffett, that he will fill more than 44 slots. So it's for a reason, because the more experience you get, the more stories you actually have to tell, or the more you can actually share from your experience. So any day spent on a job, I think if you can learn something from it, or you can learn from something from it if you look closely enough. I strongly believe.
Super.
And I mean, I also worked, during my semester time, just to add on, when I was a student, I took every job I could, right? I was also working in factories and doing whatever. And still, I learned a lot in these jobs. Even just lifting, I don't know, washing powder from one pallet to the other, I learned a lot about so many things. And just talking to people and being curious about everything that you see and questioning everything that you see is just exactly the right way.
Super, Alex. We have another one from Jimena Baltodano. It says, you said that we can tell stories while we are in a current situation, but we have to follow the rules. Which are the rules?
Lavar manos, of course. Wash your hands. That's the rules. No, I mean, telling a story as long as you stick to the rules of the current situation with the virus. So not going under like in crazy groups of people, but staying in social distancing and safety. I also know that you guys in Costa Rica are also following up on that. So sticking to the public rules of how to, be public in the moment. You can take a phone and do a story. I mean, once again, I did it today without actually seeing anybody. I think I posted later on my Instagram, in case you're curious. That's the pizza story. It's also featuring Cardi B. Yeah, I mean, you don't have to go crazy and go in a group of people. So at the moment, please stick to the rules of the pandemic situation and stay at home and do the video or the filming from your home. One thing that just came to my mind, in many phones, there's, for example, a time-lapse function. That's a very, very cool way to start. I mean, setting up a time-lapse, you have to think about, for example, if you look at the sky, where's the clouds coming? But if you do it nicely, then it's insane what kind of videos you can produce with that.
True to that. So is there any other question, guys, you have in mind? There you go, Chiara. Thank you for your talk. I would like to know which stories do you consider as successful, like the main characteristic and story has to have to be good. Thank you. And then you have Esteban Garcia also. What do you study?
Right. So what stories do you consider successful? Well, I would say very easy. Any story that gets my attention as a stupid consumer of media is a good story. If it's, I don't know, I visited Bali with my friends and we are on a boat now, likelihood I'm going to watch it is very little, because there's nothing new to that wasn't told 5 years ago or 10 years ago, or somebody, it's very generic. And any of those generic content, usually with people that are already as we are, that kind of are saturated already with content, not going to stick. But when I was just thinking about people that are really changing the game, or that are really trying some new things, there's lots of different Instagrammers that are trying some really, really cool stuff. For example, take Combo Photo is a guy who takes, I don't know, let's say a picture of a frog and a picture of a lemon, and it kind of works together and it looks like the same, so like a cucumber and something. I mean, it's two completely different things, and together it looks like it just matches because he sees shapes in a different way. That's a super, super great example of telling a story, or creating some content that is successful because it gets a lot of attention, but at the same time, it's nobody else does it. But then there's also other stories that are super successful and have absolutely no creative value, right? There was a guy, and I think the only thing he did was putting a picture of an egg, of a chicken egg, on Instagram. And I forgot the Insta handle, but it was supposed to be the egg that was the most liked picture on Instagram, because there was another picture that he didn't like, and he thought it was super bullshit that, I don't know, Justin Bieber or Kim Kardashian or somebody or Kylie Jenner put a picture on there, and it got the most likes on Instagram. And it worked. It got so much traction just because it was such a stupid idea that it's now the most liked, the most liked picture on Instagram. It's a chicken egg. So for me, that was super successful, because now I think about it. I mean, it's crazy. I wake up in the middle of the night and I think of the chicken egg. So this is a super, super successful thing. if you're really interested in visual storytelling, I can advise Casey Neistat on YouTube is a big inspiration for me. Always has been a big inspiration for me because he has a very interesting way of telling stories in a very brutal, boom in your face way, just without too much glamour. And there's tons of others out there, like Casey McPerry on Instagram is a good example. I like Paul Ripke, a German photographer, who's also doing good storytelling. Lots of them. Jan Olsen, all of them. They know how to sell a good story.
Can you go back to your CV? What do you study?
Oh yeah, so I studied business, international business in Maastricht, the Netherlands. Yeah, so more like a business background, really. And I specialized in supply chain management already in my bachelor's, and then my master's was fully in supply chain management. So analyzing value chains of products. For example, how a can of Red Bull is produced, where you get the metal from, how everything is put together before you get it in your store, including distribution.
But don't drink too much Red Bull. It's not good for your body, man.
No, of course not. My body is my temple, so it was a prop that was in my room.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, guys, is there any other question you have? Okay, see, we have Pablo Mesén. Let's see. Hola, thanks for such a great conference. I'd like to ask you to please repeat what you previously said about difference between corporate and creative related to job. Well, maybe you can, I would like to ask you for two things. Can you go to your presentation so the guys and girls can follow you in Instagram, with information from?
Of course, yeah. One second.
And then you can go back to this other slide on corporate versus creative.
Yeah, let me actually go to the more important one here, which was this one. Actually, Pablo very well observed, because I think I skipped over this part, but yeah.
But you have to share it with us because we are not.
I'm not sharing. 1 second. Let's see. Should be sharing now. So yeah, very well observed. I was actually skipping that or going too fast over that part. But yeah, I mean, my idea here was that in a corporate situation, it's more that it is encouraged, let's say, from my experience, that the way that you do your tasks and so on, that's the goal, as in, you learn over the projects, and even if you fail, then it's a learning, and then you share your knowledge afterwards. That's kind of this almost romantic idea of, knowledge sharing and design thinking and all of these frameworks that are out there, agile, and all has to be put on a very catchy name. As long as you learn something from it, because some people call it this way, others just call it bullshit bingo, but there's these kind of terms out there and everybody's just sticking to it, or inventing something new. It's almost like a yoga cult. So the other hand of then again is on the more creative side, where, and I mean, once again, I'm not necessarily meaning that a creative job in a similar sized company would do it, but more associated with a more freelance job. It's really the goal that is the goal, as in nobody's caring if it took you 25 attempts to set up the frames right, or you lost I don't know, your dog swallowed the film, or your SD card was broken, or your drone crashed into, I don't know, the ocean because you wanted to recreate that one shot from Sam Kohler, who's a dope producer for drone shots. It really is the goal that counts. Your client looks at your final product. If it's not what he wants, then he's going to tell you. And it requires from your side that there's lots of effective project management, right? I mean, you need to get your stuff up. Everything needs to be charged. You need to be ready to go. You need to take the shots. You need to be very quickly or effective and efficient at editing, while at the same time understanding what everybody wants. So that's why I associate this smaller setup of a freelancer more with the, you're selling an idea, and in the end, the client expects to have a turnkey solution from it. He expects to get a portfolio of 50 pictures you sold him, or 2 3-minute long videos. And that's what he wants. He doesn't care about everything that's in between. Whereas in a corporate situation, it was, at least from my experience, and I had lots of projects where you do a lot of projects and you do a lot of work in it, and you come up with something completely new, and then in the end they say, yep, that's great, and we're not going to do it, and here's why. But it's great that you did it because you learned about it now, right? And then you're like, yeah, but it's not going to happen. And at the same time, I don't want to, put too much blame on a certain, size of a company or job or whatever. It's, on the one hand, it's important to, in a corporate environment, to understand this. And once you know about it, then you can develop this as a skill set as well, because then you can position yourself as a problem solver, right? Then you can say, okay, I don't know what the solution is. And then everybody says, what? But then you say, yeah, but I know what the problem is. And here's how I would go to a solution. And that's super, super, super important for every company. Whereas when you sell something to a client, they're just saying, okay, what do you think? And you say, okay, this is what I think is the perfect solution for you guys. This is where we arrive. And I need this amount of time and this amount of resources as in money. And that's it. So it really depends on, I guess the perspective. At least that's from my experience, once again. Could be that the next German guy has a completely different experience, but I doubt it.
Thanks. So we have two more, and then we have an announcement from Professor Wust. So let's go for Emily.
My other question was that you said your company was based on sustainable clothing and content creation. How do you put those two things that seem so different together in one company?
Yeah, right. I mean, it's actually a growing concern from not just a niche market, so to say, to have more of a sustainable movement against fast fashion, right? So it's getting more traction in these days than I have the feeling ever since mass production of fabrics was invented a couple of decades ago. So on the one hand, we have this kind of pull where people are more willing to pay a higher price for their garments because they realize Primark t-shirts for €4 are not the nicest thing to do to our planet and to the people who produce it. But on the other hand, there's more people that also want to produce these garments because they find a need for individualization, which is exactly what we want to do, right? We have our vision of what a nice sweater should look like, what it should feel like, what it should be made of. For example, only using organic cotton, which is less water intense, making sure that the workers who are working on these fabrics get exactly the pay or more than exactly the pay of what they deserve. And making sure that no other environmental concerns are coming along the supply chain. So that's kind of on the other hand, the push, right? So you push a sustainable product, which is not coming from newly made plastic, but has recycled plastic in it and has organic cotton and has people working on that actually get a proper job pay. And at the same time, you need to generate kind of a pull from the market, but at the same time, anticipate that this pull is already existent. So people are more willing to pay for it. Over the last couple of years, there was a constant increase, but it's still not mass, right? I mean, there's still enough people out there who love to go shopping and even filming their shopping haul for YouTube and just showing off with what they all got for absolutely no money and gonna throw away anyways. So it's still a concern, and there's still the figure of fabric that is or clothing that is destroyed just for after production, just because of economies of scale is just still way too high. So I think the last tally I saw was 40% of the production of one of the biggest retailers in Germany is actually being produced just to make the products cheaper, and then it's going to be shredded right away because nobody actually wants to buy it, and that obviously has to stop. And if a small label can start with it, and there's lots of friends in different hubs around Europe, but also in the entire world that I know of, who are constantly working on these kind of things, getting better supply chains, because it's still not really easy to find a good supply chain for this inside of Europe, for example. So a lot of the sourcing that we sustainably do is still coming from Asia, whereas it should be coming from Europe. But there's after lots and lots and lots of decline in production inside of what used to be the textile heart of Europe, there's no knowledge of it anymore because it's all shifted to Asia. So this is gradually coming back with certain markets, seeing that there's factories built again, that supply chains are certified again, that are sustainable. And that is, I think, a very, very cool movement, and it's going to increase in the future even more.
Great, Alex. We have the last question is from Amanda. It says, how can we make storytelling profitable?
That's a good question. So I'm working on my storytelling, making my storytelling profitable these days. So I haven't found the solution to it yet, so I can't tell you. But I think going back to the fact that I believe that storytelling is a tool inside of a toolbox for everybody who's doing communication, be it you guys as communication experts, or being as me, or anybody who's just using communication without thinking too much about it, because we kind of have to, right? But we don't know much about it, or at least way less than you guys do. So from that perspective, I think that storytelling is a tool that without, you can't really be successful in any way. So I think in the other way, without it, you're not going to be successful. Or when you're successful, and I don't have a doubt that all of you guys will be successful, you will realize that at one or two important points, when you had an opportunity to pitch somebody in an elevator, or when you saw somebody at a bar and you knew that is the, I don't know, VP marketing for Red Bull. I'm not sponsored, by the way. That is exactly the situation where you need to tell a story. That's exactly where you can take this tool out of your toolbox and just, paint a story, or draw a story, or come up with a narrative that is compelling and brings your message across and gets you the deal, or gets you attention, or gets you a job, or gets you financial support for your business, or gets you towards your goal, or closer to your goal, or gets you a new connection, or gets you, these kind of steps. It doesn't need to be that, you go to, I don't know, a chancellor and say, hi, yeah, can I be the next chancellor? Oh yeah, good pitch, here you go. But it's more about all these small different steps, pitching it, and then trying again, and rewriting your own story, and thinking about, okay, what do I want to tell? What's my narrative? What's the narrative of my company? What is my project? How do I want to go for it? All of these small things are storytelling. And if you get this skill ongoing, then it will help you to be successful in many, 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 many situations.
Okay, thank you, Alex. I'm very pleased to have you here, at least virtually. It was a great talk. We have so many questions from a group of students. So, I would like to thank you in the name of the school and the University of Costa Rica. So let's see if, when all this COVID crisis is gone, we can have you back in Costa Rica, and we can have another lecture or talk with you live at the School of Communication. But before leaving, we have a Professor Marigen who wants to talk to us a little bit about the Horas Conferencia. So, Marigen, let's see. Profesora, ¿me escucha? Es que Marigen, she has some problems with internet. So let's see. There you go.
Hello, how are you? For all your information. Thank you for helping us in these days.
Marigen, the thing is like, se te corta la transmisión. ¿Podrías? Marigen, hola Marigen, ¿podrías apagar el video? Tal vez, Marigen, si apagas el video, es que salís congelada. Se te corta. A ver, otra vez. No, se te corta. No, se te corta. So yeah, the thing with Professor Marie, she has been struggling with internet access since last week. So maybe that's why we cannot hear from her. So ya, tal vez María, si nos escribís al chat. Vamos a ver qué me puso por acá. Let's see if she's writing.
Meanwhile, if there's any question, I'm happy to
Yeah, if there's something else.
answer another one.
Let's see. No. Oh, how is Berlin going on right now with the crisis?
Well, guess what? I mean, on top of all the crazy things that are happening right now, it's also snowing. So that's a lot of fun. No, but yeah, I mean, except everybody's holding tight, of course. But yeah, I mean, let's see how long the entire quarantine situation can actually go on before people will go crazy. I think that's going to be a very interesting. Yeah, it's a very interesting time of our lives, but I have the feeling that as long as we keep our minds together, it's going to be fine.
Yeah, true. So
Si Dios lo permite.
Don't say that. Don't say that. I mean, because of the sun. It is because when ya ahora sí.
Ahora un poquito mejor.
Un poquito, sí.
Trato de llamarte por teléfono mejor.
Sí, llámame voy a llamar a la profesora y la ponemos en speaker. I'm gonna call Professor Marigen y la ponemos en speaker. Okay. Okay. Sí, ya te estamos escuchando.
Ah, bueno, qué dicha. Muchísimas gracias. Alex me escucha también.
Sí, sí te escucha.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alex, for all your time and for all this information. Thank you for sharing everything with us. We hope that you can come back soon to Costa Rica. You're welcome to come to our school again. Y ahora les voy a decir a los que están, no sé si se mandó o no el anuncio de la próxima reunión que vamos a tener, que también muy amablemente Francisco nos ayudó a hacer el enlace. Es el próximo lunes a las 2 de la tarde. Se llama Comunicación e Innovación en tiempos de crisis humanitaria, con Ana María Monge, quien es fundadora y directora de Migration Cube y mentora de Founders Institute. Y se los voy a postear en horas conferencias. Y 1.000.000 de gracias de nuevo por todo.
A vos, gracias, Marigen. Voy a despedir a ellos aquí entonces.
Perfecto, muchísimas gracias y saludos.
Gracias. So yeah, guys, next week we're gonna have another Zoom conference with another, well, this time is Costa Rican who is also living in Berlin, and she's gonna have a talk on humanitarian crisis and innovation, communications and innovation, something like that, at the same time. So thank you again, Alex. Hope to see you back soon in Costa Rica or maybe in Berlin. And thank you guys for joining us in this first or second or third video chat. Hope you all are well, and don't forget to wash your hands. Así que,
thank you very much.
Thank you, Alex.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you very much for these many questions. I really appreciate your attention. I know how it is difficult these days to get attention, so thank you very much. Thanks, Fran, for the opportunity, and I'm happy to speak again anytime.
Ciao,
thank you very much, guys.
Ciao, chicos.
Bye-bye.
Muchas gracias.
Gracias.